When Marcus Thornfield found her collapsed against his ranch fence at dawn, clutching a crying infant in one arm and a Winchester rifle in the other, he knew this wasn't just another lost traveler. Blood stained her torn jacket, exhaustion carved deep lines in her young face, and her eyes held the wild desperation of someone who had been running for their life. But when he knelt beside her and whispered those 4 words that would change everything, neither of them could have imagined the journey that was about to unfold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Cedar Valley, Montana, as Marcus guided his horse along the perimeter fence of the Broken Arrow Ranch. At 42, he had grown accustomed to the solitude that came with managing 3,000 acres of rugged wilderness alone. The ranch had been in his family for 4 generations, but Marcus was the last Thornfield standing, content with the company of his cattle, his horses, and the occasional visit from his foreman Pete and the seasonal hands. He had been checking the north boundary fence when he spotted something that made him pull his horse to an abrupt stop. There, slumped against the weathered wooden posts, was a figure that didn't belong in this remote corner of his property. As he dismounted and approached cautiously, the morning light revealed a young woman, probably no more than 25, her dark hair matted with dirt and sweat, her clothes torn and stained with what looked like dried blood. But it wasn't just the woman that caught his attention. Cradled protectively in her left arm was a baby, maybe 6 months old, wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. The child was crying, with the persistent wail of hunger and discomfort. And gripped firmly in her right hand, even in unconsciousness, was a lever-action Winchester rifle, its wooden stock scratched and worn from use. Marcus had seen plenty in his 4 decades on this earth, including 2 tours in Afghanistan that had left him with more questions than answers about human nature. But this scene struck him as something beyond the ordinary troubles that occasionally wandered onto his land. This woman hadn't just gotten lost or had car trouble. The defensive way she held that rifle, even unconscious, the protective curve of her body around the infant, the multiple tears in her clothing that suggested she had been running through brush and bramble for hours, maybe days, all pointed to someone fleeing from serious danger. He knelt beside her, close enough to see that she was breathing but clearly exhausted beyond measure. Her face, despite the dirt and stress lines, showed signs of natural beauty, but more importantly, it showed character. Even in sleep, her jaw was set with determination, and her arm never loosened its protective hold on the baby. The infant's cries grew more insistent, and Marcus found himself torn between his natural caution around strangers and an immediate protective instinct that surprised him with its intensity. This wasn't the first time someone had ended up on his property unexpectedly, but it was the first time he felt compelled to help, rather than simply direct them back to the main road. Gently, he reached out and touched the woman's shoulder. Her eyes snapped open instantly, and in that moment, Marcus saw everything he needed to know. These were the eyes of someone who had been hunted, someone who had been pushed beyond their limits, someone who would fight with their last breath to protect what mattered most to them. She jerked backward, raising the rifle with surprising speed, despite her obvious exhaustion. But Marcus didn't move. He had learned in the military that sometimes the best response to fear was absolute stillness and calm. "Easy," he said softly, his voice carrying the kind of steady authority that came from years of handling spooked animals and dangerous situations. "You're on my land, but you're safe here. I'm Marcus Thornfield. This is my ranch." The woman's eyes darted quickly around, taking in her surroundings, calculating distances to possible escape routes, assessing threats. The baby continued to cry, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out across her face, the conflict between protective instinct and desperate exhaustion. "How long have you been running?" he asked, his tone gentle but direct. Something in his question seemed to break through her defensive walls. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and for the first time he saw vulnerability beneath the fierce determination. "3 days, she whispered, her voice hoarse from dehydration and fear. "Maybe 4. I lost track." Marcus nodded, filing away the information without pressing for details she wasn't ready to share. "When did you last eat? When did the baby last eat?" The question brought fresh tears to her eyes, and Marcus realized he was looking at a mother who had pushed herself past every reasonable limit to keep her child safe. "I don't remember," she admitted, the words coming out broken and small. Without hesitation, Marcus stood and walked to his horse, retrieving a water bottle and a protein bar from his saddlebag. He returned to her position by the fence, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. "My name is Elena," she said suddenly, as if offering this information as payment for his kindness. "This is Sophie." She looked down at the crying infant with such fierce love that Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "Elena," he repeated, testing the name. "That's a good, strong name. Sophie, too." He held out the water bottle. "Drink this slowly. Small sips." As Elena drank, Marcus found himself studying her more carefully. She was young, probably younger than his initial assessment, but she carried herself with the kind of premature maturity that came from facing adult challenges too early. Her clothes, beneath the dirt and tears, were well made, but practical. Not expensive, but not cheap either. She had been someone with a stable life before whatever had driven her to his fence line. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The baby's cries intensified, and Elena's face crumpled with a special kind of anguish that belonged to mothers who couldn't provide what their children needed. "I was breastfeeding, but I think my milk is drying up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's so hungry, and I don't have any formula, and I don't know what to do." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger, not at Elena, but at whatever circumstances had driven a young mother to this level of desperation. In that moment, looking at this exhausted woman cradling her hungry child while still maintaining a death grip on the rifle that had kept them alive, he made a decision that would reshape the rest of his life. "Come up to the house," he said, standing and extending his hand to help her up. "I've got formula in the kitchen from when my foreman's granddaughter visits. We'll get Sophie fed, get you both cleaned up, and then we'll figure out what comes next." Elena stared at his outstretched hand as if it were both salvation and potential trap. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know what I might have done, what I might be running from." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I know enough. I know you're a mother who's been protecting her child. I know you've been pushed to your limits and beyond. I know you've been brave when you probably wanted to collapse 3 days ago." He kept his hand extended. "That's all I need to know right now." For a long moment, Elena studied his face, searching for deception, for hidden motives, for the kind of false promises she had probably encountered before. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she slowly reached out and took his hand. As Marcus helped her to her feet, he noticed how she never let go of the rifle, how she kept Sophie pressed protectively against her chest, how her eyes continued to scan the horizon for threats that might be following. But she was trusting him, at least for now, and he felt the weight of that trust settle on his shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. "The house is about a mile through those trees," he said, gesturing toward a grove of pines that hid the main buildings from view. "Can you walk that far, or would you prefer to ride?" Elena looked at his horse, then back at him. "I can walk." "But Marcus," she paused, using his name for the first time. "If someone comes looking for us, if anyone asks questions, we were never here." The request hit Marcus harder than he expected. This wasn't just about temporary shelter or a helping hand. Elena was asking him to potentially lie for her, to potentially put himself at risk for strangers he had known for less than 10 minutes. But looking at baby Sophie, whose cries had quieted slightly now that her mother was standing and moving, looking at Elena's face where hope was beginning to war with fear, Marcus found his answer came without hesitation. "If anyone comes looking," he said quietly, "they won't find you. Not on my land, not while you're under my protection." Something shifted in Elena's expression then, a tiny relaxation of the rigid control she had been maintaining. It wasn't complete trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that might become trust with time and proof. As they began walking toward the house, Marcus leading his horse and Elena carrying Sophie while maintaining her grip on the Winchester, he found himself wondering what series of events had brought this young mother to his fence line. But more than curiosity, he felt a growing sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. The Broken Arrow Ranch had been built by his great-grandfather as a place where the Thornfield family could make their mark on the world, where they could build something lasting and meaningful. For the past 5 years, since his parents had died in a car accident and his younger brother had been killed in Iraq, Marcus had been maintaining the ranch more out of duty than passion, keeping the land and the legacy alive, but not really living himself. Now, walking beside this fierce young mother who had literally collapsed at his doorstep, he felt something awakening that he hadn't experienced since his military days. The sense of mission, of purpose, of being exactly where he was supposed to be at exactly the right moment. The house came into view as they crested a small hill, a sprawling log structure that managed to look both rustic and elegant at the same time. Smoke drifted from the stone chimney, and the wide front porch with its hand-carved railings suggested comfort and permanence. For Elena, who had been sleeping rough for days, it must have looked like a mirage of safety and warmth. "It's beautiful," she said softly, and Marcus heard genuine appreciation in her voice despite her exhaustion. "My great-grandfather built the original cabin in 1887. Marcus explained as they approached the front steps. "Each generation has added to it, but we've tried to keep the character intact." As they reached the porch, Elena hesitated again, that wariness reasserting itself. Marcus understood. Accepting help meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was a luxury that people in her situation couldn't afford easily. "Elena," he said, stopping at the bottom of the steps and turning to face her fully, "I want you to understand something. This isn't charity, and it's not me being a good Samaritan. This is me recognizing that sometimes the universe puts people exactly where they need to be. You and Sophie showing up at my fence line this morning, that wasn't coincidence. That was providence." He gestured toward the house, toward the promise of warmth and safety it represented. "I've been alone on this ranch for 5 years, telling myself I was content with solitude. But the truth is, I've been waiting. I just didn't know what I was waiting for until I found you collapsed against my fence, holding your baby and your rifle, ready to fight the world to protect what matters most to you." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of recognition, of a woman who had been carrying an impossible burden suddenly realizing that she might not have to carry it alone anymore. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she asked, her voice trembling with something that might have been hope. Marcus looked at baby Sophie, who had finally quieted in her mother's arms, then back at Elena's face where exhaustion and desperate determination had begun to give way to something that looked almost like peace. "I'm saying that if you're done fighting the world alone," he said, echoing the words that would become the foundation of everything that followed, "then you should stay, both of you, for as long as you need, for as long as you want." The silence that followed was filled with the kind of possibility that changes everything. In the distance, cattle called to each other across the valley, and somewhere in the pine trees, a hawk circled on the morning thermals. The Broken Arrow Ranch, which had been a place of solitary endurance for Marcus Thornfield, was about to become something entirely different. A home. A sanctuary. A place where a young mother and her baby could stop running and start living again. And for Marcus, who had been drifting through his days without real purpose since leaving the military, it was about to become the mission he didn't know he had been searching for. The chance to protect something precious, to build something meaningful, to prove that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose rather than the ones you're born into. As Elena climbed the steps to his front porch, carrying Sophie and still gripping that Winchester rifle, Marcus Thornfield felt his life shift on its axis in the best possible way. The fight was far from over. Whatever Elena was running from would eventually have to be faced. But she wouldn't be facing it alone anymore. And that made all the difference in the world. The guest bedroom at the Broken Arrow Ranch hadn't been used in 3 years, but Marcus kept it ready out of habit more than expectation. Clean sheets, fresh towels, a crib that had belonged to his nephew during family visits that stopped coming after the funerals. As Elena stood in the doorway holding Sophie, her eyes took in details that spoke of a man who maintained hope even when he had no reason to expect visitors. "The crib was my brother's when he was small," Marcus explained, testing the mattress with his hand. "My mother insisted on keeping it for grandchildren that never came. I think she'd be happy to know it's finally being used." Elena set the rifle carefully against the wall, her first act of trust since arriving. Sophie had fallen asleep after drinking her first full bottle in days, her tiny fist curled against her mother's chest. The sight of the peaceful baby seemed to unlock something in Elena that had been wound tight for too long. "I keep waiting for this to be some kind of trap," she admitted, settling into the rocking chair beside the window. "Good things don't just happen to me anymore." Marcus understood that feeling better than she knew. After losing his parents and brother within 2 years, he had developed his own relationship with suspicion about good fortune. But watching Elena rock her daughter in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, he felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with caution and everything to do with rightness. "What happened to your family?" Elena asked suddenly, her instincts picking up on the undercurrent of loss that Marcus carried. "Car accident took my parents 5 years ago," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Drunk driver on Christmas Eve. My younger brother Jake was deployed to Iraq. He was supposed to come home for the funeral, but his unit got hit by an IED 2 days before his leave started." Elena's face crumpled with understanding grief. "I'm so sorry. You've been carrying this place alone all this time." "Seemed like what I was supposed to do," Marcus replied. "Keep the family legacy going, maintain what they built. But honestly, most days it felt more like going through the motions than living." Sophie stirred in Elena's arms, making the small sounds that babies make when they're settling into deep sleep. The domestic scene felt surreal to Marcus, who had grown accustomed to the silence of empty rooms and conversations only with his animals. "Can I ask what you're running from?" he said gently. Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had been holding a terrible secret alone for too long. "My husband wasn't my husband," she began, her eyes fixed on Sophie's sleeping face. "I mean, legally he was, but the man I married wasn't the man I lived with. Derek was charming when we were dating, successful, everything I thought I wanted. But after we got married, after I got pregnant, he changed." Marcus felt his hands clench involuntarily, recognizing the beginning of a story he had heard too many variations of during his time in the military. "He started small," Elena continued, "criticizing my friends, suggesting I didn't need to work after the baby came, making decisions without asking me. Then it escalated. He controlled every dollar, monitored my phone, isolated me from everyone I cared about. When Sophie was born, I thought maybe having a child would soften him, but it made everything worse." The words came faster now, as if a dam had broken. "He became obsessed with control. Sophie wasn't allowed to cry when he was home. I wasn't allowed to leave the house without permission. He installed cameras in every room. When I tried to talk to my sister, he found out and cut me off from my entire family." Marcus had seen the aftermath of domestic abuse during his deployments, had witnessed what happened to women and children caught in cycles of violence and control. But hearing it from Elena, seeing the way she unconsciously curved her body protectively around Sophie even while telling the story, made it personal in a way that ignited something fierce in his chest. "3 weeks ago, he hit Sophie," Elena said, her voice breaking. "She was crying during one of his business calls, and he just snapped a 6-month-old baby for making noise. That's when I knew he had to leave." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of a mother's ultimate line in the sand. Marcus understood now why Elena had been gripping that rifle even in unconsciousness, why her eyes never stopped scanning for threats, why trust came so hard. "I started planning that night," she continued. "I hid money, gathered documents, researched safe houses and shelters. But Derek was smart, connected. He had friends in law enforcement, business contacts everywhere. Every place I tried to go, he found us within days." Marcus leaned forward, his full attention focused on her words. "The rifle was my grandfather's," Elena explained, glancing toward where she had set it against the wall. "I went to his old cabin in the mountains, thinking we could hide there, but Derek's people found us even there. We've been running for 4 days, sleeping in the woods, eating berries and whatever I could find. Yesterday, I saw his men searching the road behind us, so I cut through the forest to avoid them." She looked up at Marcus with eyes that held both exhaustion and steel. "I collapsed at your fence because I couldn't run anymore. Sophie needed food, needed safety, and I was out of options. But Marcus, if he finds us here, he won't just take us back. He'll make sure I never get another chance to leave." The threat was clear, and Marcus felt something cold and determined settle in his stomach. He had spent 2 tours in Afghanistan, protecting people from men who used power and violence to control others. The fact that this particular predator wore expensive suits instead of military gear didn't change the fundamental equation. "He won't find you here," Marcus said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet certainty that had made him a respected leader in his military unit. "You don't understand what kind of resources he has," Elena protested. "Derek owns half the businesses in 3 counties back in Colorado. He has private investigators, connections with police departments, lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out over the ranch that had been his family's sanctuary for 4 generations. "Elena, this land has been protecting Thornfields for over a century. It's protected me through grief, through war, through every hard thing I've faced. It'll protect you and Sophie too." Something in his tone made Elena study his face more carefully. "You're not just talking about hiding us, are you?" "No," Marcus admitted. "I'm talking about making this your home, really your home. If you want it." The offer hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Elena had been running for so long that the concept of staying anywhere felt foreign, dangerous, impossible. "I have nothing to offer you," she said quietly. "No money, no job skills that matter out here. Nothing but problems, and a baby who cries at night." Marcus turned from the window, his expression gentle but resolute. "Elena, you've been fighting to protect your child for months, maybe years. You've survived abuse, escaped surveillance, lived rough in the wilderness, and still managed to keep Sophie safe and healthy. You think those aren't valuable skills?" He gestured toward the ranch beyond the window. "This place has been missing something for years, and I couldn't figure out what it was until this morning. It was missing purpose. It was missing the sound of a child's laughter. It was missing someone who fights for what matters." Elena felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the tears of exhaustion and desperation she had been crying for days. These held the dangerous warmth of hope. "What are you really saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying that if you're willing to trust me, to give this place a chance, then I think we could build something good here. Sophie could grow up safe, with space to run, and animals to love, and a man who would die before letting anyone hurt her." The words hit Elena like a physical force. After months of having every decision made for her, every move controlled and monitored, the idea of choice, real choice, felt overwhelming. "And what would you get out of it?" she asked, her survival instincts still functioning despite her exhaustion. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "I'd get to stop just existing and start living again. I'd get to have a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just maintaining what my family built. I'd get to protect something precious instead of just protecting empty land." He looked at Sophie, still sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. "And maybe I'd get to be the kind of father figure I always thought I'd be someday, if life had worked out differently." The honesty in his words broke through Elena's remaining defenses. This wasn't charity or pity or the temporary kindness of a stranger. This was a man offering partnership, offering to build something together rather than just providing temporary shelter. "I don't know how to trust anymore," Elena admitted. "Derek broke something in me that I'm not sure can be fixed." "Trust isn't something you have to figure out all at once," Marcus replied. "It's something you build one day at a time, one choice at a time. Stay tonight, see how it feels tomorrow. If it doesn't feel right, I'll help you get wherever you want to go. But if it does feel right, then maybe we take it one day at a time until we figure out what we're building here." Elena looked around the room again, taking in the details that spoke of permanence and safety. The solid construction, the careful maintenance, the small touches that indicated a man who took care of what mattered to him. "Sophie deserves to grow up somewhere like this," she said softly. "She does," Marcus agreed. "And you deserve to have a life where you're not looking over your shoulder every minute of every day." As afternoon faded toward evening, Marcus showed Elena around the house, explaining the routines and rhythms of ranch life. The kitchen where breakfast happened before dawn, the mudroom where boots and jackets lived, the living room with its stone fireplace where winter evenings were spent reading or watching the flames dance. "It's a good life," he explained as they stood on the back porch watching his cattle graze in the distance. Hard work, but honest work. Simple in the best ways. Elena bounced Sophie gently, the baby now alert and taking in the new sights with wide eyes. She's never seen animals like this, Elena marveled as Sophie stared at the distant cattle with fascination. Tomorrow, if you're still here, we'll introduce her to the horses, Marcus said. I've got a gentle mare named Buttercup who loves children. The casual assumption that they would still be there tomorrow felt both terrifying and wonderful to Elena. For so long, tomorrow had been about survival, about staying ahead of Derek's search, about finding the next temporary hiding place. The idea of planning beyond immediate necessity was foreign, but deeply appealing. That evening, Marcus cooked dinner while Elena bathed Sophie in the kitchen sink, marveling at the simple luxury of warm water and clean towels. The domestic scene felt surreal after days of survival mode, but it also felt natural in a way that surprised them both. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Elena confessed as they sat down to eat. For you to change your mind, or for Derek to show up, or for something to go wrong. Marcus understood that feeling intimately. After Jake died, I felt that way about everything. Like if I started to care about something or enjoy something, it would be taken away. How did you get past it? I'm not sure I did, Marcus admitted. Until today. Something about you and Sophie being here. It makes the fear seem smaller than the possibility. They ate in comfortable silence, Sophie content in a bouncy seat that Marcus had retrieved from the attic, another remnant of family visits that had stopped coming. The normalcy of sharing a meal, of having conversation that wasn't about immediate danger or survival needs, felt like a small miracle to Elena. After dinner, as they settled in the living room with coffee, Marcus made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. Elena, I want you to call your sister. This suggestion hit her like cold water. I can't. Derek monitors everything. If I contact anyone from my old life, he'll track us here in hours. Not from your old phone, not using your old methods, Marcus explained. I have a secure satellite phone. From my military days. Encrypted, untraceable. Your sister deserves to know you and Sophie are safe. The offer was simultaneously everything Elena wanted and everything she feared. Contact with her sister Amy meant connection to the life she had been forced to abandon, but it also meant potential exposure to Derek's surveillance network. What if he's monitoring her phone? Then we'll be smart about it. We'll use code words, keep it brief. But Elena, you need to know that you have people who love you, people who are worried about you. The thought of hearing Amy's voice, of knowing that someone from her old life still cared, was overwhelming. Elena found herself nodding before she could talk herself out of it. Marcus retrieved the satellite phone from his study, a military-grade device that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. What's her number? With shaking hands, Elena dialed the number she had memorized, but hadn't dared to use in months. The phone rang twice before Amy's familiar voice answered. Hello? Amy. It's me, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence on the other end lasted so long that Elena thought the connection had been lost. Then Amy's voice came through, thick with tears. Oh my God, Elena, where are you? Are you safe? Is Sophie okay? We're safe, Elena managed, looking at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. We're with good people. Sophie is healthy and growing. Derek has been telling everyone you had a breakdown, that you kidnapped Sophie and disappeared, Amy said urgently. He's got police looking for you, private investigators. He's even hired some kind of military contractor group. The news hit Elena like a physical blow, but Marcus squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. They had expected Derek to escalate his search, to use his connections and resources to paint Elena as unstable. Amy, listen to me carefully, Elena said, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she still possessed. I'm not having a breakdown. Derek was abusing us. He hit Sophie. We had to run. I knew it, Amy whispered fiercely. I knew something was wrong. The way you stopped calling, stopped visiting, the look in your eyes at Christmas. Elena, half the family has been worried sick about you. knowing that her family had seen through Derek's manipulation, that they had been concerned despite his efforts to isolate her, gave Elena a surge of hope she hadn't felt in months. "We can't come home," Elena explained. "Not yet. But we're building something new, somewhere safe. I need you to know that we're okay, and I need you to tell Mom and Dad that we love them." "When can I see you again?" Amy asked, her voice breaking. Elena looked at Marcus, who had been listening to her side of the conversation with growing resolve. He nodded and held out his hand for the phone. "Amy, this is Marcus Thornfield. Elena and Sophie are under my protection now. When it's safe, when we've dealt with the legal situation, you'll be welcome to visit them here in Montana." The confidence in his voice, the matter-of-fact way he spoke about protection and dealing with legal situations, gave Elena a glimpse of the military leader he had once been. This wasn't just a rancher offering temporary shelter. This was a man making strategic decisions about a campaign he intended to win. After they ended the call, Elena sat in stunned silence, processing the conversation and everything it represented. "He's told everyone I'm crazy," she said finally. "That I kidnapped my own daughter." "Classic abuser playbook," Marcus replied grimly. "Control the narrative, isolate the victim, make them question their own reality. But Elena, you have allies now. Your sister believes you. Your family is worried about you, not convinced by his lies." The realization that her family hadn't been fooled by Derek's manipulation was both relief and renewed determination. She wasn't as alone as she had believed. As they prepared for bed that night, Marcus made one final offer that would seal their partnership. "Tomorrow, I'm calling my lawyer," he said as Elena settled Sophie in the crib. "We're going to start building a legal case against Derek. Document the abuse, file for full custody, get restraining orders that actually have teeth." Elena looked at him with something approaching awe. "You would do that? Get involved in a legal fight with someone like Derek?" Marcus met her gaze with a steady determination she was beginning to recognize as his defining characteristic. "Elena, when I found you collapsed at my fence this morning, holding your baby and your rifle, ready to fight the whole world to protect what mattered to you, I made a choice. Not just to help you, but to stand with you." He gestured toward the window, where the lights of the ranch buildings created small pools of warmth in the Montana darkness. "This place has been my sanctuary for 5 years. Now it's going to be yours, and Sophie's sanctuary too. And sanctuaries are worth fighting for." As Elena settled into the guest bed with Sophie sleeping peacefully beside her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just safety, but the possibility of permanence. Not just survival, but the hope of actually building a life worth living. Outside her window, the sounds of the Montana night settled around the Broken Arrow Ranch. Cattle lowing softly in the distance, the rustle of wind through pine trees, the steady silence of a place far removed from the chaos and danger she had been running from. For the first time in months, Elena Castillo allowed herself to believe that they had found not just shelter, but home. 3 weeks into their new life at the Broken Arrow Ranch, Elena discovered that healing wasn't just about safety. It was about remembering who she used to be before fear became her constant companion. She stood in the kitchen at dawn, Sophie babbling happily in her high chair, while Elena prepared bottles and coffee with the efficient rhythm of someone who had found her place in the world's machinery. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. The first week, Elena had startled at every unexpected sound, checked locks multiple times each night, and kept the Winchester within arm's reach even during meals. But gradually, the ranch's steady rhythms had worked their way into her bones. The predictable schedule of feeding animals, the reliable presence of Marcus moving through his daily routines, the absolute silence that meant no cars approaching on remote roads. Sophie had adapted faster than her mother, as children do. The baby, who had been fussy and anxious during their weeks of running, now gurgled with delight at dust motes dancing in morning sunlight, reached eagerly toward the ranch cats who had appointed themselves her unofficial guardians, and slept through the night in deep, secure slumber that spoke of a nervous system finally allowed to rest. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, his boots already dirty from morning chores, his hair still damp from washing up at the barn sink. The sight of him had become as natural and necessary as sunrise to Elena, though she was still learning to trust the consistency of his presence. "Pete's bringing the new horses up from the south pasture today," he announced, pouring himself coffee and settling into the chair that had become his designated spot at the kitchen table. "Thought you might want to see them." Elena had been working alongside Marcus and his foreman Pete Williams for 2 weeks now, learning the basics of ranch management and discovering that she had an intuitive understanding of animals that surprised everyone, including herself. Her business degree had proved unexpectedly useful in organizing the ranch's financial records, but it was her gentle way with the cattle and horses that had earned Pete's grudging respect. "Sophie loves watching the horses," Elena replied, lifting her daughter from the high chair and settling her on her hip. "I think she's going to be a rider someday." The casual reference to Sophie's future, to plans that stretched beyond immediate survival, still felt foreign but increasingly natural. Marcus had a way of talking about next month, next season, next year, as if their presence in those future plans was simply assumed. Not demanded or expected, but hoped for in a way that gave Elena permission to hope as well. A knock at the front door interrupted their morning routine, and Elena felt the familiar spike of anxiety that unexpected visitors still triggered. But Marcus's expression remained calm as he stood to answer it, and Elena reminded herself that this was Montana, not Colorado, and unexpected visitors here were more likely to be neighbors than threats. Marcus returned to the kitchen accompanied by a woman Elena hadn't met before. Tall and athletic, probably in her early 40s, with graying blonde hair and the kind of weathered hands that spoke of outdoor work. Her smile was genuine but assessing, the look of someone accustomed to making quick judgments about people and situations. "Elena, this is Sarah Jenkins," Marcus explained. "She runs the women's shelter in Billings, and she's also the best family lawyer in the state." Elena's breath caught. She hadn't expected Marcus to actually follow through on his promise to seek legal help, despite his assurances. The fact that he had not only contacted a lawyer, but brought her to the ranch spoke of a level of commitment that still felt too good to be true. "Miss Castillo," Sarah said, extending her hand with professional warmth, "Marcus has told me about your situation. I'd like to help if you're willing to let me." Elena found herself studying Sarah's face for signs of judgment or pity, the expressions she had grown accustomed to seeing from professionals during her marriage, when Derek's manipulations had made her appear unstable or dramatic. Instead, she saw only competent assessment and genuine concern. "I don't have money for a lawyer," Elena said honestly. "Everything I had, Derek controlled or froze during the divorce proceedings." "That's not uncommon in abuse cases," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "And it's not insurmountable. There are resources available. And frankly, cases like yours are exactly why I got into family law in the first place." Over the next 2 hours, seated at Marcus's kitchen table, with Sophie playing contentedly on a blanket nearby, Elena found herself telling her story in detail for the first time since her confession to Marcus. Sarah listened with the focused attention of someone who had heard similar stories too many times, taking notes and asking clarifying questions that helped Elena see patterns she hadn't recognized while living through them. "Derek's campaign to paint you as unstable follows a very predictable pattern," Sarah explained as Elena finished recounting the escalation of control and abuse. "Isolation from support systems, financial control, gaslighting about your mental state, then claims of parental fitness when you finally escape. The good news is that we can document all of this." Elena felt a surge of hope mixed with skepticism. "He's connected to judges, law enforcement, other lawyers. How can we possibly compete with that?" Sarah's smile held a hint of steel. "Because this isn't Colorado and Derek Mitchell's connections don't extend into Montana family courts. More importantly, we're not just going to play defense, we're going to go on the offensive." The strategy Sarah outlined was more comprehensive than Elena had dared to hope for. Criminal charges for domestic violence and child abuse, civil suits for economic abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Custody proceedings that would establish Montana as Sophie's legal residence and severely limit Derek's visitation rights. "The key is documentation," Sarah explained. "Medical records, financial records, witness statements, evidence of his surveillance and harassment. Marcus tells me you kept records during your marriage." Elena nodded, thinking of the hidden files she had accumulated over months of growing awareness that she might need proof of Derek's behavior. "I photographed everything. Bank statements showing how he controlled every dollar, emails where he threatened me, recordings of him screaming at Sophie for crying. "Smart woman," Sarah said approvingly. "That kind of foresight is going to make all the difference. But Elena, I need you to understand something. Fighting Derek Mitchell isn't going to be easy or quick. He's going to escalate his efforts to find you, and when he does, things could get dangerous." The warning sent a chill through Elena, but before she could respond, Marcus spoke up from where he had been listening quietly. "That's why Elena and Sophie aren't going to face this alone," he said firmly. "This ranch has security systems, emergency protocols, and neighbors who look out for each other. More than that, I have contacts from my military service who specialize in personal protection." Sarah looked between them with professional curiosity. "How long have you two known each other?" 3 weeks, Elena admitted, then quickly added, "But it feels like longer." The lawyer's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained neutral. "I have to ask, and please don't take offense, but is this relationship going to complicate our legal strategy? Derek's lawyers will try to paint any romantic involvement as evidence of instability or inappropriate behavior." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from the realization that she hadn't clearly defined what was happening between her and Marcus, even in her own mind. They weren't romantically involved in any physical sense, but there was something deeper developing between them that defied easy categorization. "Marcus has been nothing but honorable," Elena said firmly. "He's offered Sophie and me shelter, safety, and partnership. Whatever our relationship becomes, it's based on mutual respect and shared goals." Marcus nodded his agreement. "Elena's primary focus is Sophie's safety and well-being. Mine is supporting that focus. Everything else is secondary." Sarah seemed satisfied with their answer. "Good. That kind of clarity will serve you well in court. Now, let's talk about immediate next steps." The plan Sarah outlined was thorough and aggressive. File restraining orders in Montana courts. Submit evidence to Colorado authorities supporting criminal charges. Begin custody proceedings that would establish Sophie's residence with Elena at the ranch. Most importantly, create a legal paper trail that would make Derek's harassment and surveillance efforts visible to law enforcement. "How long before Derek figures out where we are?" Elena asked, the question that had been haunting her since their first day at the ranch. "He may already know," Sarah said honestly. "Men like Derek have resources and patience when it comes to tracking down what they consider their property. The question isn't whether he'll find you, but what happens when he does." Marcus leaned forward, his expression resolute. "When he shows up here, he's going to find that Elena isn't the isolated, frightened woman he's been chasing. She's got community now, legal representation, and people willing to stand with her." The meeting concluded with Sarah gathering Elena's hidden documentation and beginning the process of filing protective orders in Montana courts. As the lawyer prepared to leave, she pulled Elena aside for a private conversation. "I've been doing this work for 15 years, Sarah said quietly. "I've seen women in your situation try to rebuild their lives in all kinds of circumstances. What you have here with Marcus, the stability and support he's offering, it's rare. Don't let fear talk you out of something good." Elena nodded, understanding the advice even as she struggled to fully accept it. Trusting Marcus felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping meant either flying or falling, but that staying meant slow death from exposure to elements she couldn't survive alone. That afternoon, as promised, Pete brought the new horses up from the south pasture. Elena stood at the corral fence with Sophie in her arms, watching Marcus work with the animals with patient skill. 3 mares and a young stallion, all showing signs of previous mistreatment but responding to Marcus's gentle approach with cautious trust. "That stallion reminds me of you when you first got here," Pete commented, nodding toward the black horse who stood apart from the others, alert and defensive. Scared but trying not to show it, ready to fight or run depending on how people treated him. Elena considered the comparison as she watched Marcus slowly approach the stallion, moving with deliberate calm, speaking in low tones, offering his presence without demanding immediate acceptance. "What happens to horses like that?" she asked. "Depends on who's working with them," Pete replied. "In the right hands, with patience and consistency, they often become the most loyal animals you'll ever see. They understand what it means to be saved." The metaphor wasn't lost on Elena. She was watching Marcus demonstrate the same approach with the traumatized stallion that he had used with her and Sophie. No pressure, no demands, just steady presence and the offer of something better than what they had known before. Over the following days, Elena found herself drawn to the corral to watch Marcus's progress with the new horses. The three mares had settled in quickly, recognizing safety when they found it. But the stallion remained aloof, accepting food and basic care but maintaining emotional distance from the humans trying to help him. "He's been hurt badly," Marcus explained one evening as they watched the horse pace restlessly in his separate enclosure. "It's going to take time before he believes that not all humans are threats." Elena understood that feeling with uncomfortable clarity. Despite the safety and peace she had found at the ranch, despite Marcus's consistent kindness and the growing legal protection Sarah was putting in place, part of her still waited for the other shoe to drop. Still scanned the horizon for signs of approaching danger. Still kept the Winchester within reach even when logic said it wasn't necessary. "How do you know he'll ever trust again?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the pacing stallion. "I don't know for certain, but I believe that most creatures, human or animal, have an instinct toward healing when they're given safe space and time. The question is whether we have the patience to wait for trust to develop naturally instead of trying to force it." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching the ranch. Elena's body tensed automatically, but Marcus remained calm as they watched Pete's truck come into view, returning from his weekly supply run to town. Pete's expression as he climbed out of the truck, however, was anything but routine. His usually relaxed demeanor had been replaced by something Elena recognized as controlled urgency. "Marcus, we need to talk," Pete said, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Elena. Privately, Elena's stomach dropped. After 3 weeks of growing security, the return of secrets and private conversations felt like a step backward toward the isolation and helplessness she had been escaping. "Whatever it is, you can say it in front of Elena," Marcus replied firmly. "We don't keep secrets here." Pete hesitated, then nodded. There were strangers in town today asking questions. Professional-looking men, expensive suits, city manners. They were showing a picture of Elena and Sophie around, claiming to be private investigators hired by a worried family member. The words hit Elena like cold water. She had known this moment would come, but knowing and being prepared were entirely different things. "What did people tell them?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Nothing useful," Pete replied with satisfaction. "Turns out people around here don't much like city folk coming in and asking pushy questions about their neighbors. Tom at the diner told them he'd never seen the people in the picture. Mary at the general store said the same thing. Even got the impression a few folks were deliberately sending them in the wrong directions." Elena felt a rush of gratitude toward people she barely knew, neighbors who had chosen to protect her privacy without being asked. The sense of community she had been gradually discovering at the ranch extended beyond the property boundaries. "Did they leave town?" Marcus asked. "For now," Pete confirmed. But Marcus, these weren't small-town security guards or local law enforcement. These were the kind of men who don't give up easily. Elena sank onto the porch steps, the weight of inevitability pressing down on her. "He's found us. It's only a matter of time before Derek shows up here himself." Marcus sat beside her, his presence steady and reassuring, even as her world tilted toward chaos again. "Elena, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, finding the calm certainty that had become her anchor in storms of anxiety. "We knew this day would come," he said quietly. "We've been preparing for it. You're not the same person who collapsed at my fence 3 weeks ago, and this isn't the same situation you were in when you were running alone." He gestured toward the ranch buildings, toward the life they had been building together. "This is your home now, Sophie's home. And we don't give up our homes without a fight." Elena felt something shift inside her, a strengthening of resolve she didn't know she possessed. Marcus was right. She wasn't the same frightened woman who had been running from shadow to shadow, staying one step ahead of Derek's search. She had allies now, legal representation, a community willing to protect her privacy, and most importantly, she had found her own strength again. "What do we do?" she asked. But this time the question wasn't born of helplessness. It was the question of a woman ready to fight for what she had built. Marcus's smile held the same steel Elena had seen in Sarah Jenkins's expression. We make sure Derek Mitchell understands that when he comes to Montana, he's not dealing with an isolated victim anymore. He's dealing with all of us. As the sun set over the Broken Arrow Ranch that evening, Elena stood at her bedroom window watching the lights come on in the barn where Marcus was settling the animals for the night. Sophie slept peacefully in the crib beside her, safe and secure in the only home she would remember as her own. The confrontation with Derek was coming. Elena could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. But for the first time since her marriage had become a prison, she wasn't facing that storm alone. Tomorrow, she would call Sarah Jenkins and accelerate their legal timeline. She would work with Marcus to implement security measures they had discussed but not yet acted on. She would prepare for battle not as a victim trying to escape, but as a woman defending her home. The frightened girl who had collapsed at the fence was still part of her, but she was no longer the whole story. Elena Castillo had remembered who she was before fear defined her. She was a mother, a fighter, a woman capable of building something beautiful from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy her, and she was done running. The restraining order arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning, thick legal documents that transformed Elena's fear into something concrete and actionable. Sarah Jenkins had moved faster than anyone expected, filing protective orders in both Montana and Colorado while simultaneously submitting evidence packages to 3 different law enforcement agencies. The legal machinery was in motion, but Derek Mitchell's response came even faster than his lawyers. Elena was in the barn helping Marcus with morning feeding when her secure satellite phone rang. Only 4 people had the number: Marcus, Pete, Sarah, and her sister Amy. The display showed Amy's contact information, but when Elena answered, the voice on the other end made her blood freeze. "Hello, darling." Derek's smooth baritone, unchanged by months of separation, carried the same undertone of controlled menace that had haunted Elena's nightmares. She gestured frantically to Marcus, who immediately moved closer, his expression hardening as he recognized the fear in her eyes. "I have to admit I'm impressed," Derek continued conversationally. Montana was clever, rural, isolated, the kind of place where a person might think they could disappear completely. And this cowboy of yours, quite the white knight fantasy. Elena's hand trembled as she held the phone, but her voice remained steady. "How did you get this number?" Derek's laugh held no warmth. "Elena, sweetheart, you've spent too much time with simple country folk. You've forgotten what real resources look like. Your sister Amy was very cooperative once she understood that helping you was actually putting you in more danger." The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. Derek hadn't just found Amy's phone, he had somehow convinced her to give up Elena's contact information. The sister who had been her lifeline, her connection to family and hope, had been turned against her. "What did you do to her?" Elena demanded. "Nothing dramatic," Derek replied with false reassurance. "Just helped her understand that your current situation is dangerous for everyone involved. Sophie needs proper medical care, proper education, proper stability, not this romantic adventure you're playing at in the wilderness." Marcus had moved close enough to hear both sides of the conversation, and Elena saw him pull out his own phone, likely texting Pete or calling Sarah. The knowledge that she wasn't handling this alone gave her strength to keep Derek talking while Marcus coordinated their response. "Sophie is perfectly healthy and happy," Elena said firmly. "She's safer here than she ever was with you." "Is she?" Derek's tone sharpened with the first hint of real anger. "Hidden away on some remote ranch with people you've known for a month? Elena, you're not thinking clearly. You never did think clearly under pressure." The familiar pattern of psychological manipulation, the subtle attacks on her judgment and mental stability, triggered something in Elena that surprised her with its intensity. Not fear, but fury. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "Clear enough to document every threat you've made, every law you've broken trying to find us, every violation of court orders that your lawyers told you were just suggestions." The silence on Derek's end lasted long enough for Elena to wonder if the connection had been lost. When he spoke again, his voice had shed all pretense of charm. "You think your little restraining orders matter? You think some country lawyer and a broken-down soldier can protect you from me? Elena, I built an empire while your cowboy was playing with animals. I have resources you can't imagine." Marcus stepped closer, and Elena felt his solid presence like an anchor in the storm of Derek's threats. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from experience with real danger rather than manufactured intimidation. "This is Marcus Thornfield. You're trespassing on private property with your surveillance, and you're violating federal statutes with your harassment campaign." Derek's surprise at hearing another voice was audible, so the knight in shining armor speaks. "Tell me, Cowboy, what exactly do you think you're going to do when I arrive with legal custody papers and law enforcement backup?" "I'm going to do exactly what the law requires," Marcus replied evenly. "Protect the legal residents of my property from criminal harassment. Elena and Sophie have established residence here, they have legal representation, and they have community support. Whatever games you played in Colorado won't work in Montana." Elena watched Marcus's face as he spoke, seeing not just determination but strategic thinking. This wasn't emotional reaction or empty bravado. This was a man who had faced real threats and knew how to respond to them systematically. "We'll see about that," Derek said, his voice dropping to the cold tone Elena remembered from their worst fights. "Elena, you have 24 hours to bring Sophie home voluntarily. After that, I stopped being reasonable." The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at the phone while her heart hammered against her ribs. The conversation had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had changed everything. Derek wasn't just searching for them anymore. He was preparing for direct confrontation. "How bad is it?" she asked Marcus, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Marcus set down his phone, having completed whatever communications he had been sending during the call. "Bad enough that we're not taking any chances. I've contacted Sarah, Sheriff Reynolds, and some friends from my Army days who specialize in personal security." Elena sank onto a hay bale, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "He's right about one thing. He does have resources I can't match. Money, lawyers, connections, private security firms. What do we have besides good intentions and a restraining order he's already ignored?" Marcus knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Elena, look at me. What we have is something Derek Mitchell has never understood and never will. We have people who choose to stand with us because it's right, not because they're being paid." As if summoned by his words, Pete appeared in the barn doorway, his usually relaxed expression replaced by focused alertness. "Got your message. How do you want to handle this?" Over the next hour, Elena watched Marcus and Pete implement security measures with military precision. Motion sensors along all access roads. Cameras covering every approach to the main buildings. Communication protocols with neighbors and local law enforcement. Most importantly, a detailed evacuation plan that would get Elena and Sophie to safety if Derek's threats escalated to actual violence. "You've done this before," Elena observed as she watched them work. "Different country, same principles," Marcus replied. "Protect the people who matter, control the terrain, make sure you're not fighting alone." Sarah Jenkins arrived that afternoon with news that was both encouraging and sobering. The restraining orders had been served. Derek's private investigators were now under official scrutiny for harassment, and criminal charges were being filed in Colorado based on Elena's documentation. But Derek had also hired a team of lawyers who were challenging Elena's right to establish residence in Montana and demanding immediate return of Sophie to Colorado jurisdiction. The good news is that Montana courts don't automatically defer to other states in custody matters, Sarah explained as they gathered in Marcus's living room. The bad news is that Derek's legal team is experienced in intimidation tactics and jurisdictional challenges. Elena rocked Sophie gently, finding comfort in her daughter's peaceful contentment despite the chaos swirling around them. The baby had no idea that her entire future hung in the balance of legal proceedings and power struggles between adults. "What's our strongest position?" Elena asked. "Documentation." Sarah replied immediately. "Your evidence of abuse, Derek's violations of restraining orders, his harassment campaign since you left Colorado. But Elena, I need to prepare you for something. Derek's lawyers are going to argue that your flight to Montana demonstrates instability and that Sophie's welfare requires return to familiar surroundings." The legal strategy was predictable but effective. Paint Elena as an unstable mother who had kidnapped her child and dragged her to an unsafe environment with strangers. Portray Derek as a concerned father, simply trying to protect his daughter from an unfit mother's poor judgment. "How do we counter that narrative?" Marcus asked. Sarah's smile held a hint of the steel Elena was learning to recognize in the people who had chosen to fight alongside her. "We flip it. We show that Elena's move to Montana represents healing and stability, not flight and instability. We document Sophie's improved health and development since arriving here. Most importantly, we make Derek defend his own behavior instead of attacking Elena's." That evening, as Elena prepared Sophie for bed in the nursery that had become truly theirs over the past month, she reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate night. The scared, exhausted woman who had collapsed at Marcus's fence had been replaced by someone stronger, someone willing to fight for what she had built, rather than simply run from what threatened it. Marcus appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea, a nightly ritual that had developed naturally between them. The domestic peace of the moment felt precious and fragile, knowing it might be disrupted soon by Derek's arrival. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the rocking chair beside the crib. Elena accepted her tea gratefully, using the warmth of the cup to steady her hands. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but it's a different kind of scared than before. I'm not afraid of Derek anymore, exactly. I'm afraid of losing this. Losing what we've built here." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "Elena, I need you to know something. Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever Derek tries, you and Sophie belong here. This is your home, not because I've offered it, but because you've made it yours." The declaration hit Elena harder than she expected. Over the weeks at the ranch, she had been so focused on survival and legal protection that she hadn't fully acknowledged the deeper transformation taking place. This wasn't just shelter anymore. It was home in a way she had never experienced, even during the early days of her marriage, when she had still believed Derek's promises. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words coming out before she could analyze or second-guess them. "I love you, Marcus, not because you saved us, but because of who you are, because of the life you've given us permission to build." Marcus set down his tea and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her free hand in both of his. "I love you too, Elena. I love the strength you've shown, the mother you are, the woman you're becoming as you heal from what he did to you." The kiss they shared was gentle but certain, a seal on commitments that went far deeper than romantic attraction. This was partnership, the choice to build something together that was stronger than either of them could create alone. Sophie stirred in her crib, making the soft sounds of a baby settling into deep sleep. The sight of her daughter, safe and secure in surroundings that had become truly home, strengthened Elena's resolve for the battles ahead. "When Derek comes," she said, "I want him to see who I am now. Not the woman he controlled and manipulated, but the woman I've become here with you." Marcus nodded, understanding what she meant. "He's going to try to take you back to the dynamic you had before, make you feel small and powerless and dependent. Don't let him." The advice was sound, but Elena knew it would be easier said than done. Derek's psychological manipulation had been refined over years of marriage, designed specifically to undermine her confidence and independence. Resisting those patterns while under direct pressure would require strength she wasn't sure she possessed. "What if I can't be strong enough?" she asked quietly. Marcus stood and pulled her to her feet, drawing her into his arms with the kind of protective tenderness that had become her refuge from doubt. "Elena, you survived years of psychological abuse while protecting your daughter from the worst of it. You planned and executed an escape that kept both of you alive through weeks of being hunted. You've built a new life from nothing, learned new skills, formed new relationships, created stability for Sophie in circumstances that would have broken most people." He tilted her chin up so their eyes met directly. "You're not the same person Derek used to control. You're stronger than he knows, and you're not fighting alone anymore." The next morning brought news that galvanized everyone's preparations. Derek had filed emergency custody motions in Colorado, claiming Elena had kidnapped Sophie and fled the state to avoid legal supervision. More importantly, he was flying to Montana that afternoon with a team of lawyers and private security personnel. He's not planning to rely on local law enforcement, Sarah explained during an emergency conference call. He's bringing his own people and counting on legal intimidation to force compliance before anyone can challenge his tactics. Elena felt the familiar spike of anxiety, but also something new: anticipation. She was tired of running, tired of defending, tired of reacting to Derek's initiatives. For the first time in their relationship, she wanted to be the one taking action while he scrambled to respond. "What if we don't wait for him to come to us?" she suggested. "What if we meet him on neutral ground, in town, with witnesses and legal representation?" The idea intrigued Sarah. Public confrontation limits his options for intimidation. If we choose the location and timing, we control more variables. Marcus was less enthusiastic. "It also puts you in a potentially dangerous situation without the security advantages we have here at the ranch." "But it shows I'm not hiding," Elena countered. "It demonstrates that I'm confident in my legal position and my choices. Derek's counting on me being the same frightened woman he used to control. Let's show him exactly how wrong he is." As they planned the confrontation that would determine Sophie's future, Elena felt a calm settling over her that she hadn't experienced since the early days of her marriage, before Derek's true nature had revealed itself. This time, she wasn't walking into battle as a victim hoping for rescue. She was walking in as a woman defending her home, her child, and the life she had chosen to build. The woman who had collapsed at Marcus's fence holding a baby and a rifle was about to show Derek Mitchell exactly what she had learned about fighting for what mattered most. And this time, she had no intention of losing. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.